Games Workshop has made many models over the years, but few have captured the attention of wargamers as much as this model. I have heard rumors and whispers of it, but I never thought I would own one. I now have, in my possession, a Juan Diaz Demonette. And what a model it is. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle. Recently, I was searching eBay, as I often do, and I have a list of models that I keep my eyes out for, and sometimes they pop up, and sometimes I get even luckier and they pop up at a price I'm willing to pay. And recently that happened with this model. This is a Juan Diaz Demonette, often shortened to DZettes, Booby Demonettes, or the Good Demonettes. This model was sculpted way back in 2002, and it was the Demonette model, all the way up until it was replaced by the current plastic kit, which many proclaim to have been a bad move. Demonettes are lesser demons of Slaanesh. They're the most numerous of his minions, and they serve him as handmaidens and warriors. They appear both beautiful and repulsive to anyone who sees them. Their bewitching opal eyes and enchanting aura hides their androgynous features and frightening claws. The viewer always sees whatever they would consider the epitome of beauty, right before they're torn apart by a frightening demon. That's the gist of Demonettes according to the lore, but they could not always have been considered beautiful. Back in 1999, these were Demonettes. Yep, 2nd edition was an interesting time. Would these have been considered grim dark, grim derp, or just not good? The Juan Diaz Demonettes did not have much competition, but boy did they make an impression when they hit the tabletop in 2002. But they didn't last that long. The plastic models we know today replaced them after only 6 years in 2008. These Demonettes were pretty popular. I even saw some old Hammer articles and forum posts proclaiming these as the best models Games Workshop has ever made. I don't know about that, but there is certainly something appealing about them. The sculptor Juan Diaz worked for Games Workshop for 16 years, from 2000 to 2016, and he is responsible for some absolute banger models. If you have fond memories of an older model produced by Games Workshop, there's a good chance it was one of his. He is probably best known for his Demonettes, although looking through his portfolio, they look a little slapped together compared to some of his masterpieces. In fact, I didn't even know it, but I already own a coveted Juan Diaz model. A million years ago, I picked up this Games Workshop 25th Anniversary Space Marine. I got it for an absolute bargain because it looks like it's been dropped in a toilet. But who cares about the box? The contents are pristine. I didn't know it was sculpted by Juan Diaz until I did some research for this video. But back to the subject of this video. I would argue they didn't really fit into the lore all that well. They're a little bit too generically sexy, and they don't look particularly dangerous. And is it right to have models this overtly sexy? It was pretty outside the norm for Games Workshop back then. I don't really know. I think I'll get into that more after the painting. I need to let my thoughts percolate a little. But it is a cool model, and I'm excited to throw some paint on there. Now it's time to gather my supplies. I have pretty much no idea how I'm gonna paint this thing, so it's time to procrastinate. I'm gonna work on the base first. It's time to break out the Crayola Model Magic Soft Squishy Modeling Material. This stuff is one of my favorite basing supplies of all time. I broke myself off a piece. It's basically foam clay. I put on some lines of super glue on my base and created a channel that the seeker is running through. Perhaps this is a well-worn path. I pressed down more and more foam to get exactly the right look I wanted. This stuff does not hold detail well, but it works perfectly for simple ground. Next, it was time for some sand. I prepared a blob of wood glue, my preferred sand holder downer, and then I spread this onto the base with an old paintbrush. Now I always wash glue off my brushes in water, which works great, but make sure you change out your water before you switch to your good paintbrushes, because you don't want to be putting your good paintbrushes into gluey water. With my glue applied, I sprinkled on a little bit of small pebbles, then a splash here and there of some large grain sand, and then a final dousing of fine grain sand. Always, always, always add a little something to the base to make it not flat as a pancake with some sand on there. I think a little bit of elevation, a little bit of height always adds so much more interesting stuff to look at. But now the base is done, I guess I gotta actually paint this thing. I prepared my favorite primer, Black Stynel Res, through my airbrush, and then I sprayed it onto the Mini. This is the last time I'll see it in all of its shiny, pewter glory. Then I put a 50-50 mixture of airbrush thinner and white ink and gave the model a Zenithal Prime. Man, Zenithal Prime models look great. They look so good I always worry my paint job is gonna ruin it. I prepared my wet palette with the colors I figured I would use, a blue and a pink. Not my usual palette, but we're trying things out. I glazed this pink all over the model. I think this is a very intimidating shade of pink. Then I took some blue and decided exactly where this was gonna go, on the hair and the feet of these models. I thought this would add a nice fun variety. I worked on the pink some more by adding some shadows with some magenta. All of my paints are super watery at this stage. This was a period of discovery. I decided to make the tip of the tail blue. YOLO, why not? Then I mixed my magenta with some black paint and made a proper shadow. I used my zenithal peeking through to show me where this dark paint should go. I did the same things with the blue, adding in blue paint mixed with black to shade these areas. I have all of my base coats applied and I think it's looking pretty good. It's a little zine-y with the bright pink and the bright blue, but I wanted to stay away from modern Slanesh colors like pale purple and silver because this model is so different from the current range. But I think it's gonna turn out really, really nice. At this point though, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm gonna work on the tail, and once I finish the tail, that's gonna tell me how to apply my highlights and shadows to the rest of the model. I went back in with my original pink paint and brightened these areas up. Then I had a bit of a breakthrough. I mixed up some white and pink, and then I did many small stripes. This added some really cool texture to the skin, and it allowed the previous layers of paint to show through. It's like stippling, but instead of tiny dots, it's tiny lines. I glazed more pink-white mixture and watery magenta onto the tail until I was really happy with the bubblegum pink skin. You won't see this on a Space Marine. I used pure white sparingly as my lightest highlight, letting plenty of the previous brushstrokes show through. And because I'm doing such small, fine detail work, I used my finger as a mixing palette. Now that I knew what I was doing because I had perfected it on the tail, I did this to the rest of the Seeker. And the many small stripes technique helped a ton, because this metal model is not very detailed, and the metal casting makes for a gritty texture. The stippling hid all of that really well and let me really make it my own. I did more exaggerated stippling stripes on the blue hair tentacles. They look like blue worms coming out of their heads. With the Seeker done, it was time to paint the Demonette. The Seeker is mostly pink and magenta, so I wanted to paint her mostly pink and white. And I didn't use my stippling stripes, I just layered her up normally with watery glazes. I really pushed the white as much as I could. There's not too much making her look different from the Seeker. She even has the same blue hair and feet. I kinda like really little models like this because you can really get detailed with the painting, and it still doesn't take forever because it's just so small. There's not much there to paint. Alright, I have both the Demonette and the Seeker finished, and I'm really liking how it turned out. I used all the same colors on both of them, and my logic there is that in terms of like reality, the Demonette and the Seeker are exactly the same thing, they're just warp spawn. And if Slanesh calls them into action tomorrow, their roles might be reversed. But I was a little nervous that it would harm the silhouette. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between what was the Demonette and what was the Seeker. But I think it worked out really nicely by keeping the Seeker mostly magenta and the Demonette mostly white. But now it is time, it's really close to being done, now it's time for the face. And unfortunately my Demonette face has some pretty bad mold slippage. But I think I can make it work. I think I can work with it and salvage it. I will need to really hold onto the model to paint the face, so I moved it to a big old Games Workshop paint handle. I don't like it as much as my wooden blocks, but it'll help me keep my hands off the model while I painstakingly paint the face. I base coated the face with some pure pink, and just a hint of my zenithal was still showing, so I used that as a map to where my paints should go. Then I highlighted up to pure white where I could. This model is unique in that it has no nose. If it was blue, it would probably look like a Tau. I glazed magenta here and there on the cheeks to try to get a little bit of contrast back into the face. Then I used black to base coat the mouth. Because of the mold slippage, it was more of a smirky snarl instead of just a smile, but it kinda works. I used some white paint and my sharpest paintbrush to put on some tiny teeth. Then I kept working with white and pink paint to get the parts of the face that ought to be highlighted. I painted the eyes black, but black eyes usually don't look like black eyes, they look like holes. So I finished off the eyes with a tiny dot of white. The white is a reflection that makes them look glossy. Well, I did what I could. The face looks alright. There wasn't a lot to work with. But home stretch, now it's on to her jewelry, her knife, and then the base. The model was almost done. I finally broke out some colors and put some gold on all her jewelry. Gold will add some nice warmth. I base coated the straps of her dress to also be gold, using a base of earth brown so that you won't see the pink and magenta showing through. I used the same brown and white paint to paint the loincloth. I find that in my old age, I never want to add new colors. I like using what's already on my palette. Maybe it's not old age, maybe I'm just lazy. And finally, I painted the knife silver. Will that tiny knife be able to kill a Space Marine? You wouldn't think so, but I guess chaos magic helps. But you know it can one-shot a Space Marine all day long? That's right, our Patreon. If you like the videos we make and you want more, the best way to support us is by becoming a member of our Patreon. Over there, you'll gain access to some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live here on YouTube, a live hobby hangout every week, some terrain STLs, and more. With that said, this model is getting pretty close. And boom, the model is done. Now it's time to finish off that base. I gave it a coat of Nuln Oil. I want the base to look sad and desolate compared to the lively, bright colors of the Demonette. I'm doing an opposites thing. I put some black primer on top of the wet Nuln Oil to add some more variety to the lightness and darkness of the ground. And once that was dry, I dry brushed a nice light gray over everything. Then I painted the rim of the base black, but I was not quite done yet. I broke out some Elmer's glue because I wanted to glue down some static grass. I globbed the glue on with an old paintbrush, and then I used a pair of tweezers to squish on some piles of tan static grass to the model. I tapped off the extra and my Demonette was done. I am loving how this model turned out. I think that using many strokes and a kind of stippling effect on the Seeker really set it apart nicely from the Demonette, even though they both use the same 3 colors. I agonized over the paint scheme, second guessing myself constantly, but in the end, I really like the cotton candy pink and blue I landed on. It's fun, it almost doesn't feel like a 40K model. In fact, speaking of this being a 40K model, are models like this okay? Should they be in the game? Well, let me tell you a story. Recently, I was at my used bookstore and I found these books. Cool Mini or Not Annual 2008 and 2009. They're really cool. They're filled with some of the best painted minis I've ever seen. I love cracking these open and having a look, getting inspired by the artists who can paint minis in a way that it almost doesn't feel like they're miniatures anymore. But looking at the pieces they decided to put on the cover, yeah, I definitely felt like a dirty, greasy nerd walking up to the counter with these. And it's really not what these books are, they're just collections of awesome models. These books were published a little over 10 years ago, and it was a different time in wargaming. I can see the logic, I bet it did help move a few more books, just like the boobage on these Demonette models may have helped to sell more models. And I don't want to hear, well actually, if you just read the lore, it makes a lot of sense why they're naked. The lore was written to justify the models. It's actually pretty transparent why some of these decisions were made. Just like the decisions made on what models should be on the cover of these books, but the wargaming scene has evolved in the last decade. This hobby is a lot more visible than it used to be. People are really getting behind the idea of building, painting, and assembling their own miniatures and really getting to make them theirs. You get to make your models however you want, and then there's rules on how to make them fight. These models are obviously sculpted to be ogled, and that's okay. I think pinup models like this are fine, but they should not be the default option. Move them off to the side as supplemental material for the people who want them. I think the wargaming scene has matured. I think we're done with the days where this stuff was super niche and companies felt like they had to add boobies to the books and models to get nerdy men to buy them. Wargaming is for everyone, and I think the model should reflect that. Well, this model was super neat. I spent a boatload of time looking through Juan Diaz's portfolio and he made some of the best miniatures of all time for Warhammer. I really get a kick out of these out of production miniatures, and if you have some favorites that you think I should check out, please leave them in the comments below. But now it's time for the real star of the show, this week's EOB Complete submissions. We put out a challenge to our community to send us before and after photos of their recently finished models to be immortalized in our videos. If you want to join in the fun, you can submit a before and after photo of your painted mini to our Discord server, which you can find in the description below, or you can post it to Instagram with the hashtag EOBComplete. Without further ado, let's look at and get inspired by what the folks have finished this week. An Adventurer with a Stick by Bashu, a Powerful Wizard by Mr. Altair, a Little Sniper Team by Orange, a Nurgle Demon by The Happy Heretic, some Space Marine Terminators by Inferno the Dragon, a Sisters Canoness by Fuzzball, a Death Corps of Krieg by Lieutenant Angel 445, a Squad of Tanks by Caesaroke, a Little Skeleton Friend by Airship Slice, a Chaos Demon Prince by Killer Tofu, a Team of Heroes by Alex Rider 123, some Space Marine Assault Intercessors by Pyrite, a Big Ol' Imperial Knight by Name, a Weird Boy by Hyperspace, a Sister of Battle by Hunter S, a Squad of Space Marines by Dead Developer, a Baneblade Battle Tank by Gipsy Danger 1222, a Primaris Assault Marine by Bro Tato, some Primaris Space Marines by Friend of Grob, a Fire Slayer by Who Knows, some Necron Immortals by Tim Ornix, some Chaos Cultists by Brooks Mick, some Custom Adeptus Sororitas by Treant, some Blackstone Cultists by HTL Bobalicious, and a Necron Army by Meh. Congratulations to everyone for a job well done. It's no small feat to get paint on minis and you all should feel really proud. Nothing gets the hobby juices flowing like finishing a project when we all thank you for sharing your work, motivating us and the hobby community to paint our plastic. Thanks for sharing.